Hello, everybody. Thought I would go and do a back-to-back episode. Welcome to episode 119 of Psycho's Platters, sponsored by coffee. It's actually in here. It's not Irish coffee. It is not Irish coffee. Ronnie, Mike, and John, they know who they are. I'm sorry. Anyways, it's very vanilla. Seattle Best Keurig K-Cups. That's what I've got in here today. I'd show you, but I'd pour it out on the computer. Anywho, so this one, sign, everyone sign, part 3. Yes, I thought I'd go into some more here because I just had too much. I had too much. This one is still kind of researched, but not as heavily. I'm getting tired, guys, but I thought I would show you these right off the bat. We'll start off here with a Leon Russell signed album. It was Leon Russell and Mark Benno, a.k.a. the Asylum Choir, on Mercury Records. It's called Look Inside. That's the name of it. This one's a weird little gatefold. And like I said, you've got everybody in here. Of course, it was produced by them too. Very, very, very interesting little piece. Let me see if I can get in here. This is one of those Unipack albums. That's your Mercury Smash label for the Look Inside the Asylum Choir. Mark Benno and Leon Russell would cut 2 albums together pretty much in the 68, 69 vein before Leon would pretty much continue on with Joe Cocker and then a few other ones as well. Like I said, I got him to sign on the bottom here of this one. Tulsa, Oklahoma is pretty much where Leon grew up in. He went to school, go figure. These are the people that were in the same year as him or very close, but they all went at the same time frame. So you get this. Imagine if you were in Tulsa High School, okay? You had Leon, Anita Bryant, David Gates, who of course would end up, starting out as a solo singer, go to Bread, and then end up being a solo singer again, right? And a little bit younger, but still in the school, Elvin Bishop. So you have all these people in the high school. I mean, talk about all this talent, right? In Tulsa. So in 1958, he moves to L.A. He tries to go to the L.A. music scene, which is, of course, hopping. It is out there. He ends up being an arranger, a studio session musician, and does all that stuff. In 1965, he cuts his first solo 45 under his name for Dot Records. That doesn't go anywhere. 1968, I showed you the Asylum Choir album. Guys, he has been on so much session material. He also, Gary Lewis and the Playboys come to mind. He was an arranger and a producer for them too and played on those records. But there's so much. Go on, Google if you're that interesting for that. There's just too much information. And then, of course, also another one that I got signed in 1978, his Americana album from 1978. This is the front. This is the back. This is on Paradise Records. But it's just pretty cool about all of this. I can't even read who is on this thing, but I had the pleasure of seeing him twice. Okay, I was supposed to go see him in September. He came down to George's Majestic. Unfortunately, I had that Bryan Adams concert earlier in the night, and by the time that concert was over with, I was just too damn tired. But here's the thing, guys. If Leon comes anywhere near you, go see him while you still can. All right? He still keeps putting out records. The last big one he did was The Union with Elton John in 2010. I've heard some of that. Really good work on that. And I think he also was involved in a documentary recently, if I remember correctly. And he still has a little bit of family. His grandson is in the band now with him, too, and some other people. So good, talented people. You ever get a chance, go catch Leon Russell. Now, what happens is, and I did have a friend of mine that did go down to the September gig. He still will sign stuff for you, but guess what? You're not going to meet him. It's just, I'm assuming, due to the health conditions. He will sign for you, but they usually take it into the tour bus and get it signed, okay? So FYI for you. This next one here, pretty cool in my opinion. I happen to have hold here a copy of the 1984 Quiet Riot album Condition Critical. This was the second album that came out from Quiet Riot. Here's the front, here's the back. Now, Quiet Riot originally kind of got their start in 1973. Randy Rhoads, yeah, you know that name. He'd end up going to Ozzy, but at that time, Randy Rhoads and Kelly Garney, who played bass, started a band called Mach 1, which ended up being changed to a band called Little Women. By by mid 1975, though, they would change their name to Quiet Riot. When by that time Kevin DuBrow was in the band, they were hanging around out in California. Who did they bump into? But Rick Parfit. Parfit, I don't know if I'm getting that right. If that name sounds familiar to you, beautiful. If it doesn't, I'll tell you he is a guitar player and an original member of the English band Status Quo. Rick goes off and says, you know what? He throws this comment out there, and he says, I would always like to have a band. I would name a band Quite Right. Well, his accent was so thick, they didn't hear Quite Right coming out of his mouth. They heard Quiet Riot. Therefore, talk about a change of things, right? So they named their band Quiet Riot. They're like, what the hell? We'll call it Quiet Riot. Rick's got a good idea. So they end up making it, and then they end up finding an album deal with Sony Japan. They cut 2 albums in 77, 78. Band breaks up in 79 after Randy pretty much goes to Ozzy, as we all know, from 79 to 82, pretty much, of course, until he died in the plane crash. But in 82, Quiet Riot does get back together, this time with Carlos Cavazo on guitar. So basically, on this particular album, you've got Kevin DuBrow, Carlos Cavazo, Rudy Sarzo, who left, he left after the plane crash because he was in Ozzy's band too with Randy, and Frankie Bonelli, who also joined up in 82 as well. Sarzo and DuBrow were the only ones right around in the late 70s time frame, okay? So that's what you're looking at. So they end up doing that, and they end up hanging around. They cut 3 albums, and then they can't handle DuBrow anymore, so they fire him in 87, make a 4th album with the Paul Shortino, A Rough Cut, in 88, break up in 89. So many lineup changes, I'm not even going to bother to tell you. But needless to say, in 2002, the 4 members of this album get back together. And then in 2003, they do a 20th anniversary tour. This is how I managed to get this signed. It turns out that I end up meeting him in September 2003 when they came to perform in Rockford, Illinois, at a band called Oscars Fest was the name of the bar. The weather was so horrible, there wasn't even 50 people that showed up. I'm not kidding. 50 people, all 4 classic members. Kevin DuBrow and the band kicked ass. They did. They played great. And I also brought up that week was the 20th anniversary of when they played the Rockford Metro Center, roughly, and they discovered that Quiet Riot's Mental Health went to #1. And it was fantastic news. Like, they had a meet and greet afterwards for this. That's how I got all 4 of them to sign this album. I had a copy of QR3, but for some reason I didn't bother to get that signed. I don't know why. Maybe I should have. The band, believe it or not, breaks up. I'm led to believe a couple gigs after I meet them. Quiet Riot, pretty much the original 4 split up all over the place. I'm going to tell you something. What was weird about that gig, I was expecting a tour bus. There was no tour bus. These guys were driving around in 2 RVs. 2 RVs across the country. I'm like, look what 20 years does to some bands. I kind of feel sad. in a way about that. November 2007, Kevin DuBrow dies in Nevada of a cocaine overdose. They think, okay, Quiet Riot, that's the end of them. Benelli, the drummer, reactivates, and Benelli was a nice guy too, by the way. All four of them were. But Benelli and DuBrow were the ones I had the most talk to. But Benelli goes and reactivates the band in 2010, and it's still currently out there right now. You know what? Go see them. Lord knows how it's going to sound like. The lineup pretty much, though, is on vocals, Jizzy Pearl, who used to be in Love Hate, and he did a little bit of time in Rat, along with I don't know how many other bands. Former Jafria and Quiet Riot bass player Chuck Wright back in the band. He was around for QR3 and 4, if I remember correctly, on that one. And also former guitar player for Quiet Riot in the early 2000s and Bang Tango and Hotel Diablo, Alex Grossi. So that'll get you there too. This next one here, was signed in 2003. Jefferson Starship, the Spitfire album. Now, I got to tell you something. Yes, it's a beautiful album cover. I always liked this. This is one of those gigs I didn't get to go to. All right, I found out my boss wasn't going to let me out for this, so I wrote once again a two-sided page letter, basically written to Paul Kantner and Marty Balin, who were the only original members on this album. And I said, you know what, please, this would mean a lot to me if you could autograph this album, and I would sign a check to the charity, because it was a nonprofit food and shelter. Okay, believe it or not, I wasn't sure what was going to happen. Next day, I get a phone call, and they said, "Come get your signed album, please. It's at the box office." I'm like, "Oh wow, this is too cool." So needless to say, this is what I get. This is all front. This is back. Kantner's autograph is beautiful on here. There is other members in the band. Slick Aguilar, I can tell his autograph too. Prairie Prince, member of the Tubes, also an original drummer for Journey. Prairie, of course, was also in the KBC band in 1986. He, of course, at that time was drumming for Starship. So, I mean, it's kind of cool, but I'm sitting there going, why did all of them sign it when only Kantner was on this damn thing? Balin's autograph wasn't on here. I kept wondering, did I piss him off? This is not his favorite album? What? Even though it showed a picture of him going to be at the gig with the rest of the band, it turned out that I guess at the last minute there was a health crisis with his daughter, and he didn't show up. So, I mean, it's a cool-looking album. I like it. Here's the back of it, too. But you just never know is what I'm getting at. If you can't make it to a gig, and it's a charity gig, write out a small check. You just never know. You could end up with an interesting piece. I know I went long-winded again on this. I may make another episode. Do you mind if I do? Here's what I've got here. Shout-outs. Wax Museum with Ronnie Dark. Night Owl Lounge with Mike Adams. Sunday nights, 6 to 9 p.m., 9 to 10 p.m. Central Standard Time for both those shows. Thrifty Music Collectors Group, Tim Smith and Company. They keeps getting new members. It's beautiful. Shindig Magazine, the best damn English rock magazine that is out there, period. Saw their Small Faces issue. I love it. And lastly, YouTube Vinyl Community. Without you guys, none of us would be here. You take care. God bless. See you next episode.